Good evening, members, to this evening's Licensing and Safety Committee. Are there any apologies for absence? Please. Councillor Aylcroft-Scott.
Sorry, it's working now. Dan, it's Paula Hamilton. She's at a funeral. And I think Eddie's stuck in traffic. Dock Road is just murder.
Thank you, Councillor Aylcroft-Scott. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got an apology from Councillor Brake, who's somewhere on the brook on his way here. He rang me 20 minutes ago and he said he'd been there for 10 minutes, so he will be here hopefully before the end of the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp, and obviously Councillor Brake was covering for. We've got a Councillor Film, apologies, wasn't it? That's correct. And Councillor Sands as well. Okay. Can I sign the record, members, for the meeting held on the 20th of February 2025 as correct? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. I've got no urgent matters. Are there any declarations or disclosable pecuniary interests or other significant interests this evening on our agenda? No? Great. Okay, we'll go straight to number 5, the review of the allocation of committee seats, Licensing and Safety Subcommittees, pages 11 to 16. We're taking it as read, aren't we? We're taking it as read. Any member? Any comments? I think we're proud to say that all the years we've served on it, on either side, that we don't do the politics on this committee anyway. So I think we're proud of that, and we're fine with these committee seats review. Is that, Vice Chair, would you like to put the proposal?
The committee is asked to approve the allocation of seats for the Licensing Subcommittee as set out in Appendix A of the report, and any other recommendations from the committee. Thank you.
Secretary to Council, thank you. And agreed, members?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, can we go straight now to item 6, the taxi tariff review. Members will remember we did defer this at the last meeting to go off and just adjust a couple of items. And I do want to pay our appreciation to the officers, to Emily and to the MLTDA for coming back so swiftly. So over to you, Emily.
Thank you, Chair. So on the 10th of December of 24, the committee asked officers to consult the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Trade in relation to the proposed draft Hackney Carriage Tariff Review Policy. This consultation took place and responses from the trade and MLTDA were received. So on the 20th of February 25, this committee was presented with the results of that consultation. The committee deferred the decision on the policy to allow some further engagement. Following a meeting with the MLTDA Chair and Vice Chair, some amendments have been made to the draft policy. The first is the addition of an emergency review process. Should there be an unforeseen financial burden on the trade, they can request an interim review by submitting a written request supported by more than 50% of the trade. And the second amendment is the inclusion of the other elements of the tariff on a rotational basis. Each review will look at the flag yardage and one other element of the tariff. So we are asking this committee to either recommend approval of the draft tariff policy as shown in Appendix A, and they're recommending that to Business Support and Digital Overview and Scrutiny, then on to Cabinet and full Council, or to recommend some changes to the draft policy, also for approval by those committees. We're also asking for the committee to recommend the changes to the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire policy, from 21 to 26, as detailed in paragraphs 2.2 to 2.4 of the report, for approval by the same committees. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Members, the MLTDA, Nigel's here, obviously, we all know Nigel. Nigel wanted to make some comments tonight, and members agreed with that? Happy with that? Thank you. Nigel, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to thank the licensing team and management for their dedication and hard work on this. and obviously meeting up again to discuss the policy, to make the appropriate amendments on the policy. We've come leaps and bounds, and it's taken a long time, and I think everyone's glad that we've got to this stage now. The only issue that the MLTDA and members have is over the annual or biannual review situation. After long discussion, you know, myself as a driver and from the MLTDA appreciate the officer hours it does take to do a review, hence why we have the emergency review element of the policy, which is a really good, beneficial mechanism for the trade to request an increase if we have unforeseeable circumstances. The only issue that has arisen from the emergency review is the 50% of the trade element to trigger an emergency review. The way to explain it is we have 469 unrestricted private hire drivers and hackney carriages and drivers in Medway, whereas we've just got barely over 400 licensed vehicles, which says to me that there is a discrepancy between the amount of licence holders and actual physical working drivers. So in order to get a 50% petition or signatures on a petition to trigger an emergency review, it is quite an uphill battle, because we've got a lot of drivers which work every single day, but there's also a lot of drivers which are working elsewhere that hold a licence. So if you were to ask me if I was working elsewhere and not working as a taxi driver, do you want to trigger an emergency review? It would be of no interest to me because I'm not working as a licensed driver. So in order to trigger a review, we need 50% of the trade to request that view. The problem is how does one individual or one association or get that response from 50% of the trade when a majority of drivers are uncontactable because they're working in other industries, not on the road. If I was to do it as with my MLTDA team, we would strategically have to go around every single rank at every single time of the day to catch all the drivers which we don't have access to through email addresses because they're not a part of the association, for example, to generate an emergency review. That's the only issue that the association has with this policy, and I think it's absolutely brilliant. I really want to thank Emily and Mark for their time in dedicating to bring this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. And do you want to respond just to that comment, or are you content with the comments that Nigel's made? Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I understand where Nigel's coming from. I think when we met and discussed it, it was challenging trying to come up with a suitable balance, be that a number or a percentage. I don't think we're in a position as officers to be able to state that one is correct and one isn't. So just to say that we understand, I suppose reiterate that the intention was of trying to pick 50% was to try and ensure that a suitably large proportion of the entire trade would have to want a review in the event of a genuine emergency, so that it couldn't be driven by a small minority, as that was of course the very intention behind creating a policy. But apart from that information share, thank you. That's it.
So Nigel, just before we open to any questions, to be clear, your preference would have been?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, 50% is obviously half the trade, but that's it's a difficult number to, for example, as an association rep, I have access to all the members of the association, but if it was going to be an MLTDA-led petition, just for example, how does the association reach all them other drivers which are not part of the association to generate an emergency review? Whereas licensing have the details of every single driver, we do not as drivers. We're not connected. So how do we generate this one position? Or what could happen is we'll have a petition over here, a petition over there, cross over signatures. How does what is the mechanism as a trade to generate this this review? It's something that the trade needs to organise, but how do we do that when we can't access 50% of the trade to ask their opinion?
Yeah, I get that. I'll come back to you in a moment, Nigel. I'll ask members first. Any questions, members? Councillor Fern, then Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Nigel, for your contribution. Thank you, guys, for going back and re-looking at this, because obviously there's some points that we raised last time, so I'm grateful for the time and effort you've put into this. I think Nigel raises a really good point, and it was actually one of the questions that I had originally, you know, first question is, how many is 50%? Okay, but obviously that number, does it fluctuate, you know, drivers on and off, you know, how do, you know...
I would say it'd be whatever number is at the time of the calling of the petition. So whatever the number is the number that would be halved at that time.
Okay, and the second question is, why 50%? I mean, I just think, sort of agree with Nigel there. I think that may be just a little bit too high. You know, why not 50 or why not 100? You know, 50 is still a good proportion of licensed drivers, isn't it? So I think, you know, we're looking far too high. We've got first-hand experience and evidence in front of us tonight in this document to show that we had 4 people reply to our consultation at one point. I'm not sure how many replied to the last one, and I can't remember how many replied to the trade, but to Nigel, sorry. But it was a much higher number, but it still wasn't 50%. So I think we're too high. I think we need to reduce that number, and why not 50?
Thank you, Councillor Fern. Councillor Kemp, before I come to you just quickly, Nigel, did you, I mean, I do agree it's got to be led by the trade, but what was your suggested number, i.e. what Councillor Fern is asking?
Well, I mean, obviously, the reason this policy was brought in to stop one individual triggering a tariff review, we need a show of hands of 50, 100 licensed drivers to sign a petition, which is something that can be facilitated. If, for example, if you took the MLTDA aside, if me as an individual had a genuine concern that we were not, the tariff is incorrect and we need an emergency review, as an individual, so this is any individual, could go around the ranks, explain the situation and gain 150 or 100 signatures, whereas 50% of the trade I think is a bit excessive, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I've got that, Nigel, yeah, okay. Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, question for Nigel. How many have you got in the LTDA? How many members?
At present, we're obviously just renewing the membership now as we speak, because it's April to April, but we've it's approximately 140 members at the moment, which is, in my reckoning, 50% of the working trade. So in order to trigger a review, I would have to get every single one of my members to agree for a tariff review.
And you can contact all of your LTDA members by email or quickly?
Well, we do have issues with emails. Obviously, with the last, back in February, it was put in my report that we obviously sent out a load of emails. We had a lot bounce back, so only 97 were successful. We do have other means of contact through WhatsApp and Facebook group, but it's very difficult to contact every single one of the drivers in one go, if that makes sense. And your association has the majority of your, let me put it this way, the majority of the members of your association are full-time, would that be correct? Yeah, that is correct, yeah. So that's where the bulk of the taxi drivers belong. So I would suggest 50% of the LTDA members. Because that would give a good proportion of the drivers in Medway. And you'd also encourage people, other taxi drivers, to join your association. That's just what I would suggest.
Okay, any other members? Okay, I mean, I think, look, I think Councillor Fern, I mean, I'm not sure, and Nigel would know, I'm very upfront, I'm not sure, Councillor Kemp, I can go with like 60, or 70, I think that's too low. I think I'd go along with sort of like with Councillor Fern, I would say it's sort of got to be a minimum of 100 at least to spark that review. Because I do understand, and I think Mark and Emily, you'd see as well, you see the amount of feedback from the drivers anyway. But if members did agree that tonight, it would have to be something we would review if it was going to cause constant problems. But I mean, Councillor Fern, I I would go with Matt and say that I think we should go minimum of 100. That would be my suggested amount to go, a minimum of 100 members.
I'd like to second that.
I think Matt's going to second. Yeah, Matt. Is that agreed, members? Okay, agreed. Thank you very much. Thank you, Emily. My last item before we run off is I've noticed a slight change. Oh, yeah, sorry, the action. Sorry.
Sorry. The committee note the responses received during the consultation officers' associated comments and the outcome of the requested further engagement and advise any amendments to the taxi tariff review policy. The committee recommend approval of the draft policy subject to the minor amendment that we've voted on and agreed to Business Support and Digital Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Cabinet and Council. The committee note that the proposed minor amendment to the Hackney Carriage Private Hire Policy 2126 to reflect the introduction of the taxi tariff review policy. The committee recommend approval to amend the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Policy to Business Support and Digital Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Cabinet and Council. Is that seconded?
Yeah, I think
Thank you.
I think we've just agreed that. I think just making sure for Nicola, I think making sure we know it's got to be a minimum of 100, and that we can call it into review. Okay, yeah, that's fine.
We agreed as
yeah, that's great. Okay, so that's agreed. Thank you, members, for that one.
one more.
So I do realise there's a slight change on one of the plaques here on the table. And not many members may have noticed, but Emily's now got licensing manager under her title. So I presume, Mark, first, before we go, that's not a mistake, right? So,
Yes, thanks, Chair. No, that's Emily was successful in her application.
excellent. So congratulations from all of us, Emily. You're a real asset to all of the work we do here on our committee. So we look forward to working with you more closely over our next terms. Thank you. Well done. Thank you. And that brings, welcome, Councillor Bray. That brings us to a close. That brings us to the close of this meeting. Thank you very much, members. Thank you.